Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. So in the next activity, we will create a simple program which read input from a file and display shape according to the properties provided in this input file or this config.txt file. Okay, so for this we should know some concepts and I know you're already aware of them. However, just to refresh, we will be going to discuss those concepts in upcoming few videos. So, first thing first, today we will discuss something called classes and objects because that will be required. So, let me jump over here. So, first thing first, we already know what class is. So, let me just quickly provide you this a brief. So, class is a blueprint. Like you can create a class and give any properties. So, let's say this is our class and I'm So this is our class and it contains some properties and functionality like a name, an ID, and how we can set this name and how we can get this name or something called addition, subtraction. So this is a simple class where we can define the properties that we want, where we can define the data members or the members we want. So why do we need this user defined thing? Because we can it allow us to create objects. So what does object mean? So if we define a data type of our type, so this object will have all of the things that we define here, all of the properties and all of the data members, all of the functionality. So what does it mean? Instead of, let's say we have 10 students in a class, or why the class is overwhelming. So let's say we have 10 students in a batch. I think it's the right word. And every student has a name, an ID. For now, we are keeping it simple. So every student has a name or ID. So we have two ways. First, we can create an array for of string type which can store 10 names, and we can create an array for integer type which can store 10 IDs. Second, like we can create separate variables for to store the names of the student, like this S1 name or S2 name up to S10 name. Similarly for S1 ID up to S10 ID. So this is very hectic. Like up to 10 is fine, but in case we have 100, okay, if we have 100 students in a batch, what we will do, we will create 100 variables. Just imagine how difficult it will be to access those details. Let's say I want to update the details of student number 88 having ID 88. What we can do, first we need to find a student which is having ID 88, right? Then we have to find the name of that student. So it will be very hectic for us to make this. So what we can do, instead of this, we can create a class and define every properties like name and ID and create 100, 1000 or any number of objects. So every object will share the same properties. Every object will have a name, will have an ID. Similarly, object 2 will have a name and ID. So instead of working over this array or these variables separately, we just need to work with this object. So for 10 students, we only have 10 objects, and every object will have the property like name and ID. So this is what class is. So I believe you already know the structure of creating the class or the syntax. However, let me just discuss it over here. So simple, first we need to include a header file. I'm using a namespace std. We will discuss this later. Creating an entry point. Okay, So to create a class, we need a keyword called class. And what should be our class name? So I'm naming it as student for now. So this is our class. The syntax very simple. We are using a keyword class and naming it as student using two curly braces, an opening one and a closing one, and a semicolon at the end. So now also we have three types of access specifiers, which are public, private, and protected. We will discuss them in details. In detail, I think we need to discuss them. Yeah, we need to. First, let's discuss what public is. So let's say I just told you that our student can have multiple properties. So two basic properties are a name and an ID. So now why we have three access specifiers or three scopes, which are public, private, protected. First, let's know this one. Let me discuss this thing to you. So if everything is public, so what does public mean? Public is which is available to anyone, right? But there is some difference in this definition. When we are defining our functionality public, so it is telling our compiler that these functionalities are public, like these things. These thing is public, these things are public, and object of that class can access them from anywhere. So this is what public means. We can access the variables and a function we define in a public scope from anywhere. By anywhere, I mean from outside the class as well. Let me just show you. I'm creating two functions as well. Okay, I will create them later. So let me create an object first. This is the object named S1. So the syntax of creating this object is very similar to the variable that you declare in a main function. Simple. Int A. Similarly, student is our data type here. So student is a user defined data type. Class is a user defined data type. And S1 is the name. So what does it mean? Let me just give you one more thing. So what will it do? It will create an object like this and assign a memory block, and this block which will have all the properties that we define in our class. This is what's happening over here. So now if this block has all the properties, I mean this object has all the properties, how can we access them? We can access them using a special operator called dot. So as soon as I use dot, you see it is showing me the suggestion which I can use. Because these are defined in a public scope, I can access them from anywhere. So as you can see, I am accessing them outside the class, like our class defined here, and I am accessing them in a main function. So let me first set the ID to 1, and let me set the name to Sean, and I can also print them using a simple cout statement. S1 dot name, S1 dot ID. This is how I can print them. If I run this, it is printing John and 1. But if they are accessible from anywhere, like if these properties are accessible from anywhere, so we can access them, and anyone can access them and can change them, right? We don't want to do that. I think we call it data encapsulation or maybe abstraction. You should Google it out. But we don't want to do them. So what we can do instead, we can define these in a different access specifier named private in a private scope. Now, if I will try to run this program, like I'm trying to access these properties outside the class, I should get an error. So I'm getting an error which is saying everything to me is private within the correct and within the context. Error integer student is private within this context. So how we can set properties to them if everything is defined inside a private scope. We can use our second, we can use a public scope. So one thing to know that if anything is private, it can't be accessible outside the class, but we can access inside the class, right? Let's say in public, I am saying name is John, right? And also I'm creating a function to print the first name. Why I'm creating a function? Because as I just told you, we cannot access the string name directly out from outside the class. That's why I'm creating a function, because anything can be accessed inside the class with defined in a private scope. Let's say the name is name. So instead of doing this, all of this, I'm saying s1 dot get name. I'm calling this function and it should print John on our console. Name does not name a type. So we are getting an error. Why? Because we are trying to initialize this variable in a public scope. However, we are not doing this in a correct way. To initialize a variable, we should use a constructor or a function. So we will discuss what constructor is in a later video. But for now, let me just create a new variable name, a new function called void set name. And over here, I'm saying name equals to John. So if I will run this, I'm not getting any error, but it is not printing anything over the screen. Why? Because I didn't call the function name set name. So now I'm getting John. So does it mean we need to define everything here? So yes, we need to provide or we need to initialize everything in a public scope itself, but we have a different way to do that. Instead of naming it manually, what I can do, I can pass a string name str and store and copy the content of str in the name string. So instead of passing it as empty arguments, let's say I am passing a new argument called John, and if I will run this, you see it is printing John over the screen. So this is how we can use the scope variables, and this is how we can use the scopes which are private and public and protected. We will discuss what protected is. But for now, I think we already aware of what is private public. One more thing I want to tell you is constructor. So constructor is a thing which called by itself. We don't need to call it, right? So as you can see, we are calling a function over here. But if I will create a constructor is called automatically when we run the program, and it should have the same name as a class. So it is the same name. constructor is a function. So just to show you that I'm not calling it, I'm printing hello, you are in constructor. Okay, so see, I'm not calling the constructor over here, but what will happen if I will run this? So it is automatically calling this. Hello, you are in constructor. So it means we can set the properties to our object from here as well. So if I say instead of calling this constructor, I'm creating a new constructor, and this constructor accepts two arguments. The first one is string name s and the second one is I of type integer. And what will it do? It will copy the s string into the name, and it will copy the content of variable I in id, right? So instead of calling this function s1 dot set name, I can call I can define properties in my constructor. So I'm passing, let's say, John, and the id is 1. This is how you can use constructor. See, it is printing hello, you are in constructor, and the name is John. Okay, let me comment out this so that it will not confuse you. Let me comment out this one as well. So it should print only John now. So this is what constructor is. So I believe you guys are already aware of everything which we will be using in our in this small program. However, I'm just discussing to refresh my knowledge. You are free to comment and provide suggestion in the comment section. That's all for today. In upcoming videos, we will discuss how we can take input and how we can use this another scope variable which is protected. Okay, thank you. Have a nice day.